Hey YouTube, I'm back with another Master System Monday, and this time we're stepping outside of the EU and the North American region, and we're looking at something from the Sega Mark III in Japan, and it is Alex Kidd BMX Trial. This is actually one of my favorite items from my collection, even though I can't play it on because I don't have a Mark III. I have played it via reproduction cartridges that I've made because you might see here, this being a Mark III cartridge doesn't fit in a normal Master System. We'll take a closer look in a bit. But the story behind this game is essentially, I guess Sega were looking to have a reason to use this paddle controller and wanted to bundle up, tie into their perceived mascot at the time, Alex Kidd, or attempt at a mascot. And this is sort of a racing game, but it controls kind of like Breakout, as you'd expect, because this controller here it's like it's a Pong paddle controller. It's quite nice actually. It's got a slightly squish button. You got a button up here and a button here. It's very odd, and there's limits on the turn, but it does react very fast, and that's kind of what you need. I think there was a few games that required or used the paddle controller. Was the Galactic Protector, Megami Rescue, Alex Kidd, and something else. But basically, they didn't. Woody Pop, I think, was going to use it as well. In fact, Woody Pop was teased as coming out in America, certainly in some of the trade publications. So clearly, Sega did consider it, and obviously decided against it at the time. Now, if you try and play this via emulation or anything like that with a standard controller, it is so hard to control. You'll go all over the place. It's just crazy. You do need the paddle controller or something equivalent to get a feel for it. As a game, it's questionable if it's really that great. I mean, it makes decent use of the high responsive paddle, but it's not the best racing game in the world. It's not the best Alex Kidd game in the world, and it's, when it comes to collecting, very hard to find. And as I kind of touched upon, this is actually one of my favorite items from a collector standpoint because I think it's such an interesting curio. It ties in to one of the defining Master System characters, Alex Kidd. It's great to have this as a piece, and it's also great to have a Japanese game in my set because it gives me a feel for what they were like. And we look at those in more detail now. So of course, you start off, you have your manual, very tiny little manual, very thin, like wall-to-wall Japanese text. There's not really much to see here. It's Japanese, I can't read it, but I'm just amazed how tiny and thin it is. I suppose when you don't have a billion European languages to translate into, it helps. Now, the controller, we've kind of already mentioned. This came bundled with the game, required to play it. Standard connector on it, so it plugs into modern systems. So you can actually use it on a Japanese, or sorry, on a Western console, so long as you have a current mod that will play it, or probably a EverDrive might do it. And then the cartridge itself is obviously, it's a lot taller. I should have probably gotten. I'll get a Master System cartridge out so we can compare. So yeah, this is your standard Western release Master System cartridge. So you see, it's a lot shorter, but it's also wider. So fundamentally, and it's not as thin. So fundamentally, these are kind of incompatible on a physical level. You can get converters that for the Master System Model 1 that goes into the back extension port, but it's quite awkward, really. So your best bet is probably an EverDrive. I do like these, though. These are much nicer cartridges. I love the big artwork, so colorful and really ties into that. Remind you of the early Mario Brothers artwork and things like that. And of course, Alex Kidd and Miracle World had artwork akin to this too. It certainly makes it seem much more appealing than the very vanilla, very basic Western releases. And I like the clear cover. See the cart, I think, pushes up as well. So yeah, interesting cartridges. And then onto the box itself. Now this is one area where I actually think we, in some ways, got a better deal. In Japan, I think all of the releases were in cardboard boxes, so like this, which makes it very hard to keep them in good condition. And I'm actually amazed that this has lasted as well as it has. But then again, from what I've seen with Japanese collectors, they do seem to keep their stuff in very good nick. Like, I mean, you can see the challenge in getting boxed Nintendo content today is so difficult. So yeah, I wouldn't really be running to collect a lot of boxed Japanese Master System or SG-1000 or anything like that. There's not much to see at the back, really. You do get to see the Mark III console. You get to see a couple of screenshots, but obviously I can't read out the back text because I can't. I assume, actually, sorry, I've just got distracted. As SC 3000, SG 1000. Presumably it's saying it's not compatible there. I don't know what that means, but I imagine that because it's Mark III. And these were Mark III, they're the gold cartridges. And I think that was to distinguish games that were incompatible with the original SG 1000 and 3000 lines of computers and consoles. Basically, this was Sega. Look, we're stepping it up. We want to make them seem more special as well. So yeah, it's a big box to accommodate the extra controller. But to be honest, when you actually compare it to a Master System game, it's not that much different. Similar height, a little thicker, and it comes bundled with a controller. So it just goes to show you how space sensitive they probably were in Japan. Anyway, like I think I said, I got this in a trade. One of my favorite pieces of collection. It's a curio, I would say. Hard to recommend people pick it up given how difficult it is to obtain, and you know it's a limited game experience. But on the other hand, if you do want to try out all the Alex Kidd games, you do want to try out a different controller, you kind of have to have the physical one. It's not something that emulates all that well, so it's an interesting one for many reasons. Anyway, I think we leave it there. Hope you enjoyed this look at a different side of my collection, and we'll see you again next week for another Mass System Monday.